When I was a child, my parents would bring me into San Francisco every year on my birthday to a fancy hotel to enjoy afternoon tea. As young as I can remember, I've always had a fascination with Victorian England and anything to do with tea time. So I want to bring a little bit of that fascination into your home today and share with you a classic British treat that has honestly become the symbol of the nation's tea time alongside the scone. This is a classic Victoria sandwich. 2 layers of sponge cake sandwiched together with either raspberry or strawberry jam and sometimes whipped cream or buttercream. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to make it. The first is the way from the 1860s that likely Queen Victoria herself enjoyed, and this is when you bake it into a rectangular shape and cut it into finger sandwich sizes. And then the modern version, which is the size of a regular cake, layered and made with whipped cream in the middle as well. So join me today and we will explore the history and traditions of tea time in England and also make the Victoria sponge cake. Let's get started. The Victoria sponge cake is all about the weight of your ingredients. The traditional way to make it is to take 4 eggs and weigh them in their shells and then use equal weights of flour, sugar, and butter. And that's it. That's the cake recipe. So I did that. I weighed these and they came out to about 230 grams. So I have 230 grams of all-purpose flour, 230 grams of granulated sugar, and 230 grams of softened unsalted butter. So that's how we're gonna make the cake today. Now you'll notice that this classic way of making it with only 4 ingredients does not include any leavening agents other than eggs. So we're going to beat a lot of air into these eggs, but you will find that this might be a little bit denser than you're expecting for a cake sponge. So in modern recipes, they often will add a little bit of baking powder. So if you'd like, you can add 2 teaspoons of baking powder to your flour, and that will lighten it up a bit. But to be honest, I prefer it the classic way. I think it's really nice with just the eggs used. So with the simplicity of these ingredients, just 4 of them, you could call this a pantry staple recipe, just like I said in my French financier video. This is just one of those recipes you make when you have someone coming over, you have no time to run to the grocery store, and you have a few things on hand. You don't even have to use raspberry or strawberry jam. You could use whatever you have in the pantry. Add your sugar and your unsalted butter that's been at room temperature and is soft to a stand mixer. And then you're going to beat this on medium to medium high speed until the butter is light and fluffy and aerated. Then you'll add in the 4 eggs one at a time. You'll also want those at room temperature. If all the ingredients are at room temperature, then you won't risk your batter splitting. And you're going to beat each of those eggs one at a time well after each addition. You don't want to add in the next egg before the first egg has been incorporated. Then you're going to turn off the mixer, scrape down the sides, and add in your flour. And you're just going to turn it on the lowest setting so that you don't work the gluten in the flour, because this is where cakes become tough. You want to just barely mix it in until it's just combined. For this first version of the cake, the one traditional to the 1800s, I'm going to use a 9x13 rectangular cake pan, and I'm going to line it with parchment paper just for easy cleanup and to make sure that the cake pops out of the pan at the end. For pans this shape, I like to just fold the sides down and then put it in, crease the edges, and create a sort of sling. So you can sort of just lift it up to take the cake out at the end. And I just creased the edges right here so it folds over and isn't in the way. The Duchess of Bedford, Anna Maria Russell, in the 1840s is said to be the one to be the inventor of afternoon tea. Up until that point, it was a British tradition to eat a large breakfast in the morning, have a very light luncheon, and then eat dinner around 8 p.m. And she found the wait between luncheon and dinner to just be too long, and she felt lightheaded and faint, and would often request to have small cakes and butter and jam with some bread be brought to her room to enjoy with a pot of tea. But this was done in sort of a clandestine way because she thought people would look down upon her for eating in the afternoon before dinner time. But eventually she would invite people to join her, and then the Queen Victoria herself, who was friends with the Duchess of Bedford, she heard about this and started taking on the ritual herself. So that's how the afternoon tea ritual began. Tea at this time was seen as a women's drink because coffee houses in London would exclude women, so men would enjoy coffee while the women would enjoy tea at home in the drawing room with their friends. And Twinings, the company that you probably all know of as the tea company, started out as a seller of coffee and also was a coffee house itself. And they would sell tea to be brought home for women to enjoy in the drawing rooms with their friends. So after the ritual of afternoon tea was solidified and both sexes started to take part in it, both men and women enjoying afternoon tea together, that's when tea sort of took on both the role for men and women as an afternoon drink. Now, these rituals solidified differently amongst the classes. The upper classes, the aristocratic classes, would enjoy their tea at 4 p.m. and then later have their dinner at 8 p.m. But in the working classes of England, tea became sort of a replacement for dinner. They often called this high tea. I don't know why, but here in America we think of high tea as sort of this really fancy sort of tea, but high tea in England refers to tea with a substantial evening meal. It was referred to as high tea because of the high tables that they would eat at. They would take the tea at the same type of tables that you would take your meal, while afternoon tea was taken on the lower tables that were in a drawing room. So afternoon tea is actually considered the term for the fancier type of tea. And to this day, depending on where you are in the UK, some regions still call the evening meal tea, and it was in the Victorian times called high tea or sometimes meat tea, referring to the fact that a substantial dinner was eaten at that time. So now that I've spread this in my pan, we're gonna get it in the oven and we'll talk a little bit more about tea in a little bit.
Bake this in a 350 Fahrenheit or 180 Celsius preheated oven for 25 to 30 minutes or until lightly golden, and you can insert a toothpick and it comes out clean.
I've remade the same cake batter using the same ingredients. The only change I made was I added 2 teaspoons of baking powder to the flour. So we're gonna try that out and see what the difference of consistency is to make this more modern version of the Victoria sponge. I have an 8-inch cake pan here, and I've put a circle of parchment on the bottom just to make taking the cake out a lot easier. I'm just going to spoon it in, level it out, and then pop this into the oven and bake it just like I did the other one.
You're going to bake this style of cake at the same temperature, but this time for about 45 to 50 minutes. If you find that it's getting a little bit too golden towards the end, you can drape it with a tint of foil. For both styles of cake, you're going to let them cool completely before you slice into them. For the rectangular cake, I found it easiest to cut it into 4 sections and then trim off the ends to neaten it up. And then each of those 4 sections I sliced horizontally, and these are going to be spread with jam before slicing into finger sandwich slices. If you're enjoying this video and have learned something, I invite you to hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this one where I delve into a European baked good and its traditions.
In terms of which jam you use, the traditional flavors are either strawberry or raspberry, but you could use whatever you have on hand or whatever your favorite flavor of jam is. And you could make the jam from scratch. I suppose that would be the more traditional way to do things, but I find that as long as you're buying a good quality brand, that it doesn't really taste any different than homemade jam. So I picked up a brand that only has the ingredients of strawberry, sugar, and lemon juice reduced, which is exactly how I would make it at home. So I'm gonna spread each one of these with jam and then slice them into finger sandwich size slices. For the second Victoria sponge that I made, the one that's round and has the baking powder in it, I'm going to make a layer of whipped cream to go with it, to go along with the strawberry jam. So I'm just adding a pint of whipped cream or heavy cream into my stand mixer with about a couple of tablespoons up to a quarter of a cup. It's whatever your preference is on the sweetness, into my stand mixer, and then I'm going to whisk this until it turns into whipped cream. Anytime whipping heavy cream, just make sure you don't go past that point of stiff whipped cream, because if you keep going, it'll separate and turn into butter. So just keep your eye on it as it's mixing.
Then you're going to take your cooled cake and slice it in half and put a generous amount of strawberry jam on the bottom. Then you're going to put the whipped cream that you made on top of that. You might not use all of it. You can save the rest for putting on top of each slice as you serve it. Then you're going to top it, give it a little bit of a press, and dust it with powdered sugar.
I have a slice of each kind, and I've had Victoria sandwich many times, but I'll give it a go on camera for you guys. And you know, I've never compared these two types side by side, so let's see which one I like best. I tried the one with the baking powder and the whipped cream first. It's just a lovely sponge cake, light and fluffy. Love the taste of the strawberry and the whipped cream together. I personally think whipped cream tastes best in this compared to buttercream. Others might prefer buttercream. Buttercream would definitely give the cake more structure. It's a little bit difficult to slice into the Victoria sponge when there's a layer of whipped cream there. It kind of oozes out a little bit, but it doesn't really bother me. I just think it's a nice fresh flavor to have the whipped cream versus the really sweet buttercream. So let's give the sandwich slices a try. So similar flavors, but a very different feel. You don't really feel like you're eating the same cake, even though they both are filled with strawberry jam. This one is denser, but it's also very soft because that layer of jam softens the whole thing as it sits. I would recommend, if you want to make this, to let it sit for a couple of hours before you serve it, just because that jam really softens the cake layers. So this is just a nice strawberry flavored treat to go with a cup of tea if you don't want a big slice of cake with filling in it. Both are lovely. I like both. Honestly, it's hard to choose. They have just very different qualities to them because this one is denser and it's more for eating with your fingers, and this one just feels like you're serving a slice of sponge cake. So it really just depends what your goals are, if you want a finger food or if you want a cake to serve. So definitely give this a try if you've never made a Victoria sponge before. It's just a simple, fresh, delightful dessert to go with a cup of tea with a group of friends. And if you want another Victorian dessert to enjoy with a cup of something hot, I highly recommend watching this video next for my English apple dappy. And I'll see you next time.